This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Podcast presented by GSMC Podcast Network. My name is Chris Blades, and before I get started here today, I want to make sure I take the time out to remind you, as always, if you haven't already, subscribe to the podcast, make sure you never miss an episode, make sure you're always on top when we drop our latest stuff. Also, if you could please as well, give us a 5-star rating, write us a nice review. Very appreciated, very helpful. Also, if you guys like, if you guys dislike, the ways we can improve, all that fun stuff. And also, if you're on social media, we're on social media, so you can find us there, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We can talk. We can chat, we can debate, we can discuss, and I figured, as I normally do on these Monday episodes, recap the NFL weekend. I figured since the biggest game, or I don't want to say it was the best game, but the biggest game, the most important game, the game with the biggest implications, happened in the AFC. So I figured this week I would, instead of starting with the NFC like I normally do, start with the AFC. And obviously you guys know which game I am talking about. That is Steelers-Ravens. Obviously, many people would have preferred this game be on prime time over Cowboys-Eagles, and after watching the full game. While, the first half of that game was pretty rough, it obviously turned it on a little bit in the second half, with teams scoring touchdowns and stuff like that. But the first half was very rough. The halftime score was 17-7, but, there was a couple turnovers. Like I said, those Steelers didn't really do a whole lot offensively in the first half. It was kind of a mess. But again, obviously the second half was better, and that allowed for the game to be more interesting. And plus, it came down to a last-second play there at the end, which is always pretty interesting. But yeah, so Steelers-Ravens didn't get off to a hot start, I should say, for Lamar. As third play of the game, he throws a pick six to Robert Spillane. I believe Spillane, something like that. He's one of the linebackers that's helping fill in for Devin Bush now that he's going to be out for the year. And they also, funny enough, I guess a couple hours after, sometime during the Sunday night game, they traded for Avery Williamson from the Jets, who clearly are continuing to sell off their players, which when you're bad makes a whole lot of sense. But they didn't really get a whole lot for him. They traded him in a 7th for a 5th, but the picks were in 2022, so they're not even going to get anything back from him for a little while. But hey, the Jets can do as they wish. It really is up to them at this point. Hey, look, clearly they're going to be a bad team. They're selling. But still, you figured you could get a little bit more than that from a team that needs linebacker help, at least in the interior, because it's obviously Trey White, not Trey White, TJ Watt. I know I said Trey White. TJ Watt, Bud Dupree. They're fine on the outside from a pass running standpoint. We're just, again, you got to try to make up for Devin Bush. And while the Spillane guy was good today, can't count on that for 8 games plus the playoffs, I would imagine. So it makes sense to get some reinforcements in there. So like I said, Lamar did not start off hot, did not have a great day at all. I believe he ended the game with 5 turnovers. It's at least 4. I know he had 2 picks, and he lost 2. He fumbled 3 times, but lost 2 of them. So 4 turnovers. Then again, it's the Steelers' defense. Their defense is very good, so it's not like a complete shock. But again, for a guy like Lamar, who's coming off an MVP year, you were at hope that he would play a little bit better than this through, I guess, 7 games they played. And he just hasn't really yet. But again, he's not really the biggest passer. Like in terms, he wasn't going to put up massive. He's not going to put up Patrick Mahomes type numbers, but still, you'd hope for a little bit better passing the ball wise. But again, his receiver situation is kind of shaky. Their number one receiver is a tight end in Mark Andrews, in my opinion. And their number one receiver, Hollywood Brown, literally had 2 targets today. well, number one in terms of their first round pick from last year, only had 2 targets today. Getting out targeted by the likes of Willie Snead and Miles Boykin and Devin Duvernay. So that's not a good sign. Like I said, the Ravens were at least able to build a little bit of a lead. And even though they had the pick 6 to open the game, they were able to come down next drive, score a touchdown on a Miles Boykin nice little pass from Lamar. Then they were able to force a fumble on Big Ben, sack. No, take that back. They forced it on Claypool. But then Lamar fumbled right back. So it was basically all for naughty. Bud Dupree got the strip sack. Then there was, like I said, there was some punts back and forth. The Ravens scored another touchdown before the half, this time by Gus Edwards. And they kicked the field goal to end the half. So they were up 17-7 at half, even though they really didn't play that well, offensively at least. But they were up 17-7. Hey, can't be mad. The defense was looking good. And then things kind of got turned around after Lamar's second pick. So this came after the Ravens defense had forced a 4-and-out to start the half. He got it was picked off, intended for Mark Andrews. And then 2 plays later, the Steelers score. This was time from an Eric Ebron pass. It was underneath the pass. There was no one really around him. He got into the end zone. And then the Ravens went 3-and-out. The Steelers come down again. Put together a nice little 10-play drive over 6 minutes. This time, James Conner runs it in. And then now, after being down 17-7 to start the half, they're now up 21-7. With like halfway or a little, with 5 minutes left in the third. Like I said, the Ravens offense really wasn't able to do a whole lot. They did score a touchdown a little bit later to tighten the gap and get it to 24-20, to take the lead, 24-21. Early in the fourth, that was on the Hollywood Brown touchdown pass that didn't look in, but then they had to review it, and then it eventually got overturned, if I remember correctly. I think that was the play. I believe that was. I've watched a lot of football today, so bear with me. But yeah, then the defense wasn't able to hold Big Ben and the Steelers. It came down 8 plays, 80-yard drive, touchdown. This time to Claypool on a first and goal, and then they got a sack. I think it was another sack fumble. Oh yeah. Well, no, they take that back. They tried to run it on 4th down, which I think they tried earlier in the game as well. Your best option on a 4th down and like a decent distance is like a zone read, like a quarterback run. Probably not the greatest, but they try to run. Lamar tried to run, tried to go up the middle. He got hit by Minka. He was going to be short anyway, but then the ball got knocked out. Steelers recovered. They went on a quick 3-and-out. So because again, Baltimore was able to call some timeouts. And stuff, so they weren't really able to do a whole lot with the ball. Then the Ravens got it back, had a chance there. They were able to drive down, get to the Steelers 23. Had had one shot there at the end zone to Willie Snead. He basically threw it in triple coverage. It could have been picked off by Minka, but it wasn't. And the Steelers remain undefeated. I believe this is tied for the best start in like franchise history, something like that. The defense, like I said, did what it had to do, made life hell for Lamar, which is again what they do to most quarterbacks. Had 4 sacks, hit him 9 times, had the pick 6 obviously, had 2 interceptions, recovered 2 fumbles. Like they were great. The offense did enough. Like Big Ben wasn't anything spectacular. Under 200 yards, but 2 touchdowns. The running game really didn't do a whole lot. But again, when your defense is playing that well, you get some short fields, you don't really have to. So still, if you're wondering how good the Ravens are, I feel like that's still a question. Like I feel like whether you think they're the best team or not, like the Steelers are good. Like they're 7-0, they've beaten good teams, like they're good. The Ravens, on the other hand, are a weird one because the 2 best teams you could argue they played, and the Chiefs, well not argue, the 2 best teams they played this year, Steelers and the Chiefs, they've lost. And in neither game has Lamar looked good. And again, I'm not going to try to rag on him or anything like that. Like I still think he's a good quarterback, but it's gonna be questioned this week. Like how good is he, and how good can they be without a consistent passing game? And like I said, especially now in this day and age in 2020, like you can't just be run dominant because you're not always gonna have the lead. Granted, they did have the lead today, and some of the reason why they lost the lead was because of some turnovers, which is a separate point. But again, you need to be able to get yourselves back in the game or throw yourselves into games, which is what they couldn't do against the Chiefs earlier. And like I said, when push came to shove down there at the end, they need to get the ball down the field, mainly passing. They weren't really able to, or weren't able to successfully. Let me not say that. They were able to get down the field a little bit, but weren't able to successfully in order to come back and win the game there at the end. So, like I said, shout out to the Steelers. They're 7-0. Still the only undefeated team in the league. So there's definitely worse things you could be right now. Again, I would still probably have them below Kansas City in the AFC hierarchy just because Kansas City still has Patrick Mahomes. But again, very big, very good win for them. Another big game in the AFC was the Patriots and the Bills. And while the Bills didn't have their best game, Josh Allen did not have their best game, they were able to come up with the plays when they needed to, especially on defensive end, and we'll talk about that at the end, to pull out a win and kind of beat Big Brother, if you will. Because this was really the big test for them, even though the Patriots aren't that good this year. They were without Edelman and N'Keal Harry. Like, obviously they had all the opt-outs for the year and everything. Like, they're not their normal selves. And also Cam's not playing that well this year. But the Bills still need to, whether it's to prove to themselves, prove to the doubters, whoever, that they could beat the Patriots in order to, again, secure their spot atop the AFC East. Like, granted, they would have still been at the top even if they lost this game, but you get the point. Like, just psyche-wise and mentally, you need to be like, hey, look, we can beat this team. We are the best team in this division. And it was definitely tight there at the end. They had the shot. The Patriots were driving, and obviously Cam fumbles the ball, which was unfortunate for him. But that's something that the Bills defense is good to see from their standpoint if you're a Bills fan, just because that's something they hadn't been doing was getting turnovers. And I remember they were talking about on the broadcast just about how one of their big issues this year, they weren't really creating turnovers as much as they used to. Again, their defense wasn't great. It wasn't terrible this year, but again, they were part of what makes a very good defense is turning the ball over on top of like stopping them and getting sacked and things like that. Like, you can stop the team from scoring by creating a turnover, obviously, and then B, give your offense short fields or even score off the turnovers, whatever. That's a big boost to your team. So like I said, that's what they were able to do there at the end, able to force the fumble on Cam as he was scrambling, and they were well within field goal range. They're at the Buffalo 19 at that point. This is like with 40 seconds left in the game. So they were definitely going to at least get I don't say definitely because can't trust kickers, but they had a good shot at getting a field goal, let me say that. And unfortunately, they were not able to because obviously he fumbled. And it's just unfortunate for Cam because, he had been playing well on that drive. He hadn't played well the whole game. He'd been playing well on that drive. And he's kind of been struggling since he came back from COVID and things like that. But this would have been a big drive and a big win for them. And now he fumbled it away. So that's unfortunate. But shout out to the Bills. They're now 6-2. Don't know exactly where they are in the AFC standpoint right now, but they're still one of the better teams. That's good. And speaking of one of the better teams, or what was thought to be one of the better teams, the Titans caught one of the surprising L's of the day. We'll talk about the other one in the next segment, but one of these surprising L's of the day to the Bengals of all teams. Not that the Bengals are bad or anything like that, but again, they were 1-5-1 for a reason, and they were just able to do what they had to do. They got up big they were up at halftime, 17-7. They were able to get a touchdown there right at the end of half from Gio Bernard. Put them up 10. Joe Burrow played well at 26-37, 249, 2 touchdowns. Receiving, T. Higgins had 6 for 78, I think. Even like Auden Tate had like 5. No, he had 7, for 65. Tyler Boyd had 6 for 67. So, again, no one really was amazing, but they had a bunch of contributors. And, like I said, they were spreading the ball around, spreading the wealth around. Gio had 62 yards on the ground and a touchdown. So he was good. Like I said, Burrow was efficient. And they were able to corral that Titans offense a little bit. Granted, Derrick Henry still did his thing at 112 yards, a touchdown on 18 carries. But passing-wise, outside of Corey Davis, no one else on that team could really do a whole lot. A.J. Brown, for whatever reason, wasn't really getting targeted that much. And I guess it was because of the good coverage, whatever kind of coverage they were playing on him. He only had 4 for 24 and a touchdown. Like I said, Corey Davis showed out today. But, again, the rest of their passing game was not really there. Tannehill had a very pedestrian day. and they were able to pull out the win. And like I said, they were even able to pull it out a little bit because of their defense. Well, obviously because of their offense, but because of their defense. Their defense held the Titans to 7 points well into the second half, into the fourth quarter. Actually, they didn't get to 14 until the fourth quarter. And again, this is a Titans offense, I should say, that isn't bad. Like, not at all. Like, Tannehill have been playing well. Obviously, they have Derrick Henry. Like, they're able to put up points. No, they're not the Chiefs or anything like that. They're able to put up points. So this was definitely a surprise. But again, the Bengals are going to be. I'm not going to call them Dolphins this year, or from last year, but they have been in games. Like, it's not like they're getting blown out. It's not like they're getting smoked like they were last year. Like, they've been in games. Like, they lost close and blew a big lead to I don't know about big, but I know they blew a lead to the Colts. They were in it with the Browns, and again, if Baker Mayfield doesn't have the best day of his career, they maybe win that game. They were in it against the Browns the first game as well. Could have had a chance to tie the game against the Chargers in game 1 if Bullock doesn't miss the kick and then fake an injury. And I said, all right, they lost to the Ravens. That's expected. But still, and we'll see what happens when they play the Steelers next weekend. But again, they're not that far off. They still need a little bit of help. They still need a bit more pieces here and there. But it's good to see at least that Joe Burrow looks good, and because of that, the team doesn't look terrible. Again, they're not great. Their record is still 2-5-1, but at least they're competitive. It's a competitive 2-5-1, which is again what you want to see from a young, inexperienced team like that. That isn't that's not really supposed to win this year. You want to at least see them compete, which is what we saw from the Dolphins, and now they're standing here at 4-3, which we'll talk about in a second. Also in the AFC, what else did you have? Obviously, you had Mahomes put on the show, threw for 400 yards. Yeah, 400 yards, 416, 5 touchdowns. It was against the Jets, but still, Mahomes is. If Russell Wilson isn't the best quarterback isn't playing like the best quarterback in the league right now, it's clearly Patrick Mahomes. Like there's a clear drop, and I don't want to say that clear because again, Tom Brady's been up there, Tannehill was up there before today. Aaron Rodgers had played well, other than the Bucs game. Again, there were other guys that were playing decently well, but right now it's those two, and then it's everybody else. Like I said, Tom Brady probably is, depending on how he plays on Monday, which, I mean, it's the Giants, so he'll probably play well. He'll probably be in that next tier, but right now, Russell Wilson and Mahomes are in a tier of their own. And again, I'm not saying that based off the Jets game, but again, he's just been playing well this year. Also, this one other game I wanted to touch on was this Chargers-Broncos game. Doesn't really matter. It was just a random game. But the Chargers, much like, if the Falcons weren't the Falcons, we'd be talking more about how the Chargers lose in crazy and almost historic ways. In their last 4 games, the Chargers have blown leads of 17, 17, 16, and today, 21 points. And I'm just that's just the mark of a poorly coached team. And again, I don't want to badmouth Anthony Lynn or anything like that. Well, I guess, and the last 4 losses, I should say. Because obviously they didn't blow a lead against the Jaguars. Oh, no, I lied. They did. Oh, yeah, they were up 16-0 and then went down 21-16. So there's that. So I lied. So yeah, there's that. But yeah, it's just, that's the mark of a poorly coached team. You play so well in the first half, or earlier in the games, you get a big lead, and then for whatever reason, somehow, you screw it up. Man, you could take that back. They should have beat the Chiefs. If you go through all their games that they've lost, you could argue they should have won almost every single one of those games. Literally almost every single one. Which is crazy because they only have 2 wins on the season. So you could easily argue they should have at least 3, 4. They could easily be 6-1, 5-2, or 5-2, something like that. Very easily if they could just hold leads. But this one was bad. The Broncos' offense had looked like it couldn't do anything for basically 3 quarters, and then they get a touchdown halfway through the third quarter, and then all of a sudden they figure something out in the fourth quarter. They score. They get a touchdown pass, and they get a couple touchdown passes from Drew Lock early. Then obviously have to drive there late after the Chargers would kick a field goal with no time left. Drew Lock hits KJ Hamler, does his little dance on him, and they lose as time expires. Well, granted, they had to kick the extra point technically, but with 0 on the clock, they lost the game. And again, Herbert did have his hand in it. The couple of his interceptions weren't great. The first one early in the game was bad, but it's like, hey, it's still early in the game. It's not the worst. But the one later in the game, especially after they had gotten a turnover off of Drew Lock and they were up 24-10 at the time, what was bad just because it wasn't really necessary. He tried to throw it deep. And again, it was a very good play by Bryce Callahan, but still, it was just like, you don't need to, they're at the 19-yard line, like, you don't need to really force anything. You're going to kick a field goal, go up 17 points with a quarter to play. Like, you should be fine. And yet, it gets picked off. And then, like I said, that kind of got the Broncos rolling to score a touchdown. They scored 3 touchdowns on their next 3 drives. So, again, it's unfortunate. But, the Chargers, if the Falcons aren't going to Falcon, the Chargers are going to Charger. And that's kind of where we're at. So, again, it's rough for, I don't know that many Chargers fans in real life, but I imagine it is very rough for you right now because you keep finding ways to lose games that you should win. Just like I imagine it's hard for Falcons fans, so they keep finding ways to lose games they should win as well. And now both your teams don't have a good record when you could easily have 2 to 3 more wins on the season if you could just hold a lead. But hey, we'll see if Anthony Lynn survives this season. Because if they keep blowing leads like this, especially double-digit leads in the second halves and fourth quarters of games, it's going to be hard for you to justify him keeping his job. The only saving grace would be Justin Herbert continuing to play well, which, I mean, he's been doing regardless, but still. We'll see how it plays out as the season continues on. So, after this break, we will come back and discuss the NFC side of things, because like I said, there was another very interesting upset on that, and also some other interesting games and matchups that happened. So we will discuss them right after the break. Stay right there.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
GSMC Podcast Network. So, Packers-Vikings. Now, on paper, was this a marquee matchup? I mean, it's a divisional game, so divisional games are always a little bit weird. Probably the biggest matchup, at least in terms of record and things like that, was the Saints and the Bears, and we'll get to that in a second. But Packers-Vikings was the second surprising outcome of the day, at least in my opinion. Now, maybe if you're a Vikings fan, you were a little bit more aware of how bad the Packers' run defense was. Then maybe this wasn't a surprise for you. But at least to me, in terms of, again, like the matchup and the record and things like that, I was quite taken aback by how the Vikings dominated the Packers in this game. Quite a bit. And by Vikings, I mainly mean Dalvin Cook. Because he had himself quite the day. I think he had over 200 yards from scrimmage, 4 touchdowns, literally accounted for all the Vikings touchdowns, had 163 on the ground on 30 carries, added 2 receptions for 63 yards and a touchdown. So, yeah, and he was basically the entire offense. Kirk Cousins did not have to do that much. Adam Thielen, Justin Jefferson, none of those guys really had to do a whole lot. Because Dalvin Cook did a lot of the heavy lifting. And hey, if you have somebody that can't stop, like if there's a certain play or there's a certain player that the other team can't stop, you feed that player. It's the simple thing. It's the same thing you would do in basketball. If you got a hot hand or something, you find ways to get him the ball, get some shots up for him, run the offense to him. Same thing if you got a good receiver that's going well. and again, there's a certain corner that or matchup they have that he can't be covered. You throw him the ball more. This was no different. The Vikings offensive line was dominating the Packers, and in turn, Dalvin Cook was having a great day. So there's no reason not to keep feeding him the ball, and that's how you end up with 163 yards on the ground and 3 touchdowns. And the Packers just had really no answers. And now, funniest thing enough, they came out to start the half. 13-play drive. Cool, get a touchdown. Vikings come right back, get a touchdown. Green Bay comes back again. 15-play drive, gets a touchdown. The Vikings come right back on a 12-play drive of their own, get a touchdown. And that's how the half ended. It was 13-play, 10-play, 15-play, 12-play drive, 10 and a half. And then they had one play that they kneeled to don't take that back. No, they ran the ball, and then they just called it a half. The Packers did, and that's how the first half went. It just back and forth in terms of the team scoring, going on long drives, not being able to stop it. But again, the Vikings, their defense hasn't really been like that great, so that's not that big of a shock. The Packers defense was supposed to be a little bit better, and again, it really wasn't. When the second half came, again, the Vikings got the ball, 10-play, 85-yard touchdown. The Packers weren't able to convert a 4th and 10. Because I think they had a couple back-to-back drops by Equinemi St. Brown, or back-to-back at least passes that went incomplete while being thrown his way. And again, with outside Devontae Adams, they need to find something. Apparently should have kept Travis Fulgham because they had him for a couple of days in camp and let him go, and that's how the Eagles ended up with him. And shout out to them for that, because he's one of the few bright spots on a team that, even though leading their division, is still under 500. So there is that. But yeah, maybe they could use him, maybe not. Who knows? Who knows how he would look? Obviously Devontae Adams. Again, their skill sets aren't the same, obviously. Devontae Adams is clearly better, but he's a big body receiver, good footwork, things like that. That's kind of what Devontae Adams is. Just obviously much better. But hey, then after they turned it over on 4th down, the Vikings come back 4 plays, 63 yards. This time, this was the receiving touchdown, 50-yard catch and run from Dalvin Cook to the end zone. And now, after being tied 14-14 at halftime, they are down 28-14. The Packers are, and they couldn't really get a whole lot going up until the very end. It was out of reach. They had another drive where they had to punt. They had a drive where they turned it over on 4th down. Another time, they got a touchdown with about about 3 minutes left. And they were able to get the 2-point conversion, so they ended up down 6. So then, if you get a touchdown, a touchdown extra point, you win the game. The Vikings, unfortunately, at the punt, they weren't able to bleed the clock out. Obviously they would have liked, but hey, it is what it is. And then the Packers got the ball, and then Aaron Rodgers got sacked and fumbled. And that's how the game ended with 12 seconds left. Again, they were able to drive down, at least in the Hail Mary territory, especially for Aaron Rodgers. We've seen him hit some miraculous Hail Marys in his career. This was not going to be one of them, and the Vikings came out with the dub. So again, the Vikings were coming to this game 1-5, just like the Bengals were coming in 1-5-1 against a team that was 5-1. And again, it just goes to show that the records sometimes can just get thrown out. They don't honestly mean anything. Obviously, they are important to kind of differentiate and figure out who's good, who's bad, things like that. But in terms of actual on the field product and win-loss, it's not always that simple. And as we've seen today, or we saw today, or on Sunday, that is very much the case. So shout out to the Vikings for getting their second win of the year. And as I said, we will transition into that Saints-Bears game, because that was a decent one. Went to overtime, obviously. The Saints were able to pull it out there at the end. But this was another one where the teams offensively didn't really have a whole lot going for them. The Bears just don't really have the greatest quarterback play, nor do they have a great play caller, Matt Nagy, at the moment. And the Saints are just, again, they were down Emmanuel Sanders and Michael Thomas. Again, don't really have the receivers. Their best receiving option is either Jared Cook or Alvin Kamara, and it's probably Alvin Kamara. He had 9 catches for 96 yards. A lot of it on check downs and not much short passes where you have to do a lot of the heavy lifting, because Drew Brees is not really forcing the ball down the field like that, which, he's old, so it is what it is. But yeah, the Bears offense just wasn't really able to do a whole lot for most of the game. They had their bright spots here and there, but they were down they were up, 13-10 at the half, mainly because of a missed field goal and a nice catch from Allen Robinson of their own. Like I said, they look good in spurts, the Bears offense does, but it's just not nearly consistent enough over the course of 60 plus minutes to be anything viable right now, and that's why they are 5-3 with a defense that is quite good. Like I said, their offense was able, or again, not near, because then they'd be the best team in the league, but if it was closer to the level of their defense, they would have probably beaten the Saints. They probably would have beaten the Rams last week because the Rams offense wasn't really all that special. And they probably beat the Colts. Because in the defense, relatively speaking, did what they could. Again, they had their moments. And obviously they gave up the field goal in overtime. But again, that was after the offense got the ball, 6 plays, went 8 yards, and had to punt. And literally only got granted, Allen Robinson got the catch anyway, but I would give to the first down on defensive holding, and then basically did nothing with it, 2 incomplete passes and sacked in overtime. But and even with that, outside of that, they have to do another one there. Nick Foles had to do another one of his patented late game. I'm kind of thinking it up, but I come back and make it look like it's not so bad situations, because to open the second half, they punt, and then did they block it? Oh no, this is the big return that they had. Yeah, Deontay Harris had a 42-yard return, and then the Saints weren't able to do a whole lot, but they were able to kick a field goal. Then the next drive on second down, Nick Foles throws a pass in the direction of Jimmy Graham. He doesn't really see it, and Marshawn Lattimore sees it, and he picks it off, and then they get another field goal. So again, if the Saints were peak Saints in terms of their offensive output in this game, they probably could have blown the doors off this game a little bit earlier, because again, they would have to settle for a lot of field goals, especially early in that game. And then, like I said, the teams went back and forth with punts and turning the ball over on downs, things like that. But then the Saints were able to get a touchdown to Jared Cook to put them up 10. Oh, no, to put them up... No, the Jared Cook touchdown came in the first half. My bad, fellas and ladies. They got a touchdown pass to Taysom Hill in the second half. And that also put them up 10. And then at that point, you're like, oh, the Bears are probably done because their offense had been so terrible for the majority of the second half. But then they were able to drive down the field, get a touchdown pass to Darnell Mooney. So then it's like, oh, okay, maybe we got something. Then the Saints went on a quick 3-and-out. Very, very quick. And then Nick Foles did his thing where he drives the team down the field, gets them in the field goal range, does enough of what he has to do on the last drive. Like I said, get them into position, make the throw that need to be made. Cairo Santos hits a 51-yard field goal and to send it to overtime. And then, like I said, 2 punts and then the field goal drive by the Saints, in which they were able to get it down, kick the field goal on first down. I'm not a big fan of that. I'm just like, hey, if you can score a touchdown, score a touchdown. I don't understand playing for the field goal. But again, Will Lutz is a relatively good kicker, so there's no real harm in it, personally. But like I said, they got a big run on that drive from Alvin Kamara, which again, shocker, I know. But yeah, he's the best player on their offense, and it's surprise, he made the big play in overtime to get them a lot into much closer field goal range. It was a 20-yard run, and that kind of set them up in good position. So they were able to get that win. They're now at 5-2. Like I said, the Bears are 5-3, so they can't even capitalize on the Packers losing to the Vikings. But the Saints, again, they got to keep pace with the Bucs. The Bucs are playing the Giants tomorrow. So, today when you hear this. So you expect them to get that dub there. So then it was a good game for them to keep pace. I talk about a couple more games. So Seahawks, Niners. Seahawks dominated this one. They were up 27-7 at the end of the third. Jimmy G had to come out. I think he hurt his ankle. But he wasn't really doing a whole lot. Got sacked a couple times, threw an interception. He was not playing well. Nick Mullins actually came in and played pretty well after the fact. But again, by that point, they dug themselves too big of a hole where it was almost too little too late to come back from. And it really was. They basically scored in quote-unquote garbage time. They scored a touchdown down 30-7 and scored a touchdown down 30-14 and then also down 37-20. So again, the game was never really all that close after after early and like they excuse me too much, but then came back after the second half and kind of dominated. And then, like I said, the score looks closer than the game actually was, but that second half was really not all that close. Russell Wilson, another 4-touchdown performance. DK Metcalf had himself a day, 12 for 161 and 2 touchdowns. DJ Dallas, who had to fill in for the injured Carlos Hyde, Chris Carson, and I think like Travis Homer was also. Well, no, Travis Homer did have one carry. So who was the other guy? I think like Rashad Penny's still there. I don't know. I haven't heard too much about him. But regardless, they were out. They were down like 3 running backs. Dallas got a touchdown, so shout out to him. But yeah, this was really just a story of their defense playing well. They got 3 sacks on the Niners. Plus, again, like I said, they got the pick. And Russ being Russ and DK Metcalf being DK Metcalf in terms of them now probably being a top 5 at the very least, maybe even a top 3 quarterback receiver duo in the league currently. Again, obviously some guys are hurt, so it's hard to say for certain, but like it's hard to say anyone has a better connection than them at this moment. Again, there's maybe a couple guys you could argue, but it's really hard to put it up there. And mind you, DK didn't have to do a whole lot last week, so they have to make up for it this week. And they did. Like I said, 12 for 161 and 2 touchdowns. Definitely is that. And like I said, the Seahawks are now, 6-1? I believe. Yeah, 6-1. They have the best record in the NFC. Currently not the best record in the NFL, but the best record in the NFC right now. And they said they needed to, after losing to the Cardinals last week, they needed to win to kind of keep themselves a little bit ahead of them. Obviously, they helped out by Rams lost. Dolphins dominated Jared Goff today. Absolutely dominated. Obviously, Tua got his first win, threw his first touchdown pass, things like that, but he didn't really have to do a whole lot. He just had to not get in the way. And he didn't get in the way. The special teams and their defense did what they had to do and made life miserable for Jared Goff. So they caught that L. And then, the only game I wanted to touch on a little bit was this Cowboys-Eagles games. It was terrible, so like I said, I didn't want to walk you guys through that one. But the Eagles do win. They are heading into their bye with the lead in the NFC East, which, again, may very well be a consolation prize at this point. The team, whoever gets that gets the 5th seed, is probably going to be the happiest person. Their teams are going to be literally playing for the 5th seed. Though, I will say, the Eagles, based on like who they have out and who they have that could potentially come back, plus the fact that like you hope like Carson Wentz doesn't turn the ball over 4 times the rest of the season, every game the rest of the season, which I mean he's turned the ball over each game in his first 8, so you hope you get some of those things cleaned up. They have the best chance to at least do something out of the division issue. Like the Giants aren't really going to do a whole lot. Dallas with their injuries at offensive line, even though they won't be having Ben DiNucci start every game, but Dalton did not look that good while he was in there. And like Washington, like with Kyle Allen, their defense, their front 7 and stuff like that, like they're solid. But like Kyle Allen, like come on, like what are we talking about here? There's no way that Kyle Allen is going to win a playoff game. So in theory, the Eagles, if they get, like I said, they get Miles Sanders back, they get Zach Ertz back, they get Lane back, maybe they get a little healthy in the second half of the year, and Carson Wentz stops turning the ball over so much, you would think they could actually do something potentially, at least in one round of the playoffs. Depending on the matchup. Because again, this is not, as we've seen, it's not like a lot of these teams in the NFL are just completely infallible. Like, teams can be beat. Like I said, the Packers lost to a one-win team. The Titans lost to a one-win team. It's not impossible. Definitely not impossible. And also, we'll see how they play, because they play the Seahawks, they play the Packers, they play the Saints, they play the Cardinals, they play the Browns in the second half of the year outside of the division games. So, they're going to play playoff caliber teams heading into their playoffs if they win the division. So we'll have a good idea of how good they are after they get through that stretch. I think they have the back-to-back games like Seahawks, Packers, Saints, something like that in a 3-game stretch. So we'll really get to see if they're going to stand any chance in a playoff matchup. But I mean, at this point, somebody's got to win the division, unfortunately, and it looks like the Eagles, at least as of right now, are in good standing. Like I said, they probably have to beat out the Washington football team at this point, who they've already lost to this year. So there's that. But that game is not until week 17 they play again. So we'll see if that game could be very important. Might even, as bad as it is, may even get flexed into a primetime game. I know how much people love watching the NFC East in primetime, but it's for the division. They're going to flex it. I'm sorry, guys. But yeah, they didn't, like I said, the Eagles didn't really look that good. Offensively, didn't look that good. They were able to pressure Ben DiNucci, get some sacks, get some turnovers, which, again, not shocking. He's Ben DiNucci, so it is what it is. Carson, 4 turnovers, like I said. But on the positive side, Travis Fulgham looks like a legitimate wide receiver. And, continues to look like a legitimate wide receiver. Let me say it like that. He looked like a very good wide receiver throughout majority. He's only played 5 games, but he has, I think, at least 70 yards in 4 of the last 5. And then in the other one, that was a 2-catch Niners game in prime time, which, funny enough, they're now 3-0 in prime time. So if just all their games are in prime time, maybe they'd be better. The Eagles are. But yeah, then in that game, he had the quote-unquote game-winning touchdown, because obviously the Alex Singleton pick-6. After that, really helped seal the deal. But that was the go-ahead touchdown in that game. So he's a great, again, shocked I guess with the Lions, they have Kenny Galladay, so I get why they don't want 2 of the same guy. But the Packers, as a team that didn't really do a whole lot at the wide receiver position, it definitely looks bad for them to let a guy that is performing at this level go. And again, who knows if we'll keep this up for the entirety of the season, but 5 games of this is better than 5 games of any receiver they've gotten that isn't named Devontae Adams. So there is that, but yeah. I don't even want to say shout out to the Eagles because they were sorry. But they did win, which is, again, at the end of the day, you play to win the game. So a win is a win, a loss is a loss. You don't get style points or you don't get more, that you don't get 2 wins if you win by a certain number. You just get wins. And then the team that desperately needs some wins and needs to get healthy heading into their bye, which hopefully they'll be able to do. This is what they needed. It wasn't ugly. It was ugly. It wasn't pretty. But again, a team that's desperate for wins just needs to get the win. So shout out to them for at least that. So we'll see how that goes for them after their bye. When I think they played the Giants their first game out. So you saw how close that last game was. We'll see if it's any better after their bye week. But who knows at this point. So that's the NFL. After this next week, we'll come back and discuss college football because there wasn't a whole lot of interesting games, but there were definitely some interesting takeaways that I had from this past weekend. So we will discuss them right after the break. Stay right there.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Here again on the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by GSMC Podcast Network. So my first main takeaway from the college football weekend is that everybody's playing for second place in the Big Ten. And again, this doesn't really come as a shock or a surprise to anyone that pays attention to the Big Ten or knows the Big Ten, just because Ohio State has been and continues to be the best team in the conference. But I'm not even sure who the second best team is. Now, it might be Wisconsin, but they couldn't play obviously because of COVID, so we'll see kind of how they come out of that. But outside of them, it's really hard to say because people are like, oh, maybe it's Michigan this year. And then Michigan goes and loses to Michigan State. And their offense does not look as good as it looked last week. And so there's that. Because obviously they put up big numbers against Minnesota, but then Minnesota also lost to Maryland this weekend, so hard to say how impressive that win is. But yeah, they go and lose to Michigan State, who got smoked is probably a little too strong, but definitely got dominated by Rutgers, who then in turn lost to Indiana. So maybe it's Indiana? I don't know. But again, they lost to a Rutgers team that hadn't won a Big Ten game, I think, since like 2018 or something like that. Like it had been a while since the team was able to get a win in conference. So that's definitely not the school you want to be. You don't want to be the team that like, oh look, here they lost to the team that everyone beats. That's definitely not how you want to start off your year. But then again, like you bounce back and get the win over Michigan. So it's like, hey, again, you would rather not lose to Rutgers, but if you're going to lose one game, it would be not to Michigan. So there is that. So like I said, I don't know how good Michigan State is. I don't know how good Michigan is. Like I said, Minnesota started off 0-1 and then lost in overtime to Maryland this weekend. And it wasn't even really, I mean, it was close, obviously, but Tua's brother had an amazing day. Had 5 touchdowns, 3 passing, 2 on the ground. They gave up, 200 yards on the ground to somebody who named Funk, who I'd never heard of before, Friday night. They gave up multiple 200-yard pass catchers. They themselves had a good day on the ground, but Tanner Morgan, who has Bateman, and who's potentially a first-round pick, and this Autumn Bell guy, who's also clearly not bad. He had 6 for 157 and a touchdown. And yet they still only threw the ball 15 times, which again was kind of odd. It's not like the weather was that bad or anything like that. I mean, Tua's brother threw it 35 times for almost 400 yards. It is what it is. But yeah, I mean, they were running the ball. Ibrahim had 200 yards on the ground, 4 touchdowns. So I get it. But it's just odd. The same thing I kind of noticed with them last year. I'm like, they don't throw the ball enough. But again, they have a new coordinator, things like that, because obviously their coordinator went to Penn State. A great help that has been to Penn State. It helped them so much this weekend against Ohio State. Their offense looked so much better. But yeah. So yeah, they lost in overtime. Shout out to Maryland for going for the 2 points. But at the end, I feel like if more teams or more schools or whatever you want to call it should do that. Well, no, I take that back. Minnesota went for the 2. That's my bad. Oh no, they didn't. I forgot. The guy just missed the extra point. Oh, Lord, I thought they went for the 2. I apologize, guys. I thought they went for the 2, but they did not. The guy just missed the extra point. I forgot about that. Yeah, they should have went to 2 overtimes, but hey, can't trust kickers. So I guess I was thinking of a different game. But yeah, so that's how Minnesota lost. They got the score in overtime, and then their kicker misses the extra point. So that's a tough one. That's a tough way to catch that out. But hey, shout out to Maryland. They did what they had to do. So like I said, Indiana beat Rutgers, who, again, don't know how good or bad Rutgers is. Though I do know Indiana technically should have 1 loss, but it is what it is. I am now over it because Penn State stinks. But yeah, I mean, they kind of dominated that game. It was never really all that close. So hey, maybe they're the second best team in the conference. Like I said, I still probably put my money on Wisconsin, but like I said, with their quarterback out, 2 more weeks, we'll see how they look without him, if they can even play next week, because obviously they had a lot of guys, I think like 20 people within the program in some capacity that tested positive or whatever. So again, that's not that bad, because teams have been down 30 plus scholarship players this year, which again, not a good thing that they're playing without that many scholarship players, but again, it has happened. So there is that. But yeah, I guess we'll see how they look without him, and also how he looks when he comes back. Because like I said, Cam has not looked good post-COVID. You hear about just normal people. Again, they're not athletes. They don't have the nutrition and the physique that these college athletes and even professional athletes have. But you hear normal people all the time say it takes you a while to get back right after COVID. And again, we just act like, oh, these guys quarantined for 10 days, 2 weeks, or whatever. And again, none of them really have it severe, it sounds like, at least, which is a good thing. But that doesn't mean your body's going to be 100% right. We always act like they are, or it's going to be, which again, I feel like is a problem in and of itself, because it's not just that simple. It's literally not. It's not a cold. It's more than that. So again, just assume that people will be completely fine is a little bold, especially when we've seen cases where that hasn't been instances, I should say, where that hasn't been the case. But hey, is what it is. So yeah, and then obviously, like I said, with Ohio State, they dominated Penn State, which again, no shocker to anyone that has watched either Ohio State or Penn State over the last few years. And then especially after you lose to Indiana, you're kind of like, yeah, there's no real way they beat Ohio State, even at home. And again, maybe the game goes differently if there's actual fans and things like that. But without that, the Penn State rated no shot. On top of the fact they're just not as good. So there is that. Like I said, the 13-point deficit does not really indicate how far apart this game was. The Penn State got some things going late, mainly just owing to Jahan Dotson, who had 3 touchdowns. He had 3 touchdowns on the day. Shout out to him. But again, that game was never all that close. Yeah, I mean, I would guess it was kind of close in the third quarter, but not really. Because they got a score early in the half, but then the defense just gave it right back, so it really didn't matter. Like I said, the game was never that close, and Ohio State continues to show their dominance in the Big Ten, so at this point, pretty much everybody's playing for second place, unless something happens, or something shocking happens. Again, they still have to go through some of the better teams in the conference. They still have to play Indiana, they still have to play Michigan, and I guess that's really it. That's why I lied. Because they don't have to play like Wisconsin or anybody like that, or Minnesota. So Indiana and Michigan are the only 2 ranked teams left. Don't really know how good either of those teams are, especially since Michigan State beat Michigan, so it's hard to say for certain. They play Rutgers next week. They are almost 40-point favorites. Yikes. But yeah, like again, everybody's playing for second place in the Big Ten. Unless, again, something shocking happens, which, hey, maybe I could be shocked. So that was my one major takeaway. My other major takeaway is that the Big 12 season, in terms of a college football player standpoint, is literally finished. And as we talked about before, it was like kind of done after the whole Oklahoma and Texas, after they got off to kind of a slow start, but it was like, oh, maybe Kansas State or Oklahoma State could save it. And then Kansas State went and got smoked by West Virginia, so that doesn't help. And Oklahoma State lost to Texas in overtime. Now, I mean, overtime losses are somewhat close, but they were up by double digits in that fourth quarter. They were up. And like I said, that kind of thing just shouldn't happen, where you lose a double-digit lead in the second half. But hey, that's what they did. Now they have to go back and forth. The game, like I said, went to overtime. Let's see, ESPN app's all kind of out of whack. I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, Sam had to drive them down the field to tie the game at half, which again is not shocking because that's kind of what they do. Is they end up having to come back and try to win games late in the game. But he had to come back and take the lead, I should say, after Sanders. No, it wasn't Sanders. It was L.D. Brown fumbled, and the Texans were able to get a touchdown after that. And then, like I said, Oklahoma State had to come back, kick a field goal to get it to overtime. Which, hey, shout out to him. The guy made it. Then we get to overtime, and the Sam throws a touchdown pass, and the Oklahoma State Cowboys cannot convert. Sanders gets sacked for a 13-yard loss on the last play of the game. And they catch that L. Ellinger was not that good, but he threw for 3 touchdowns, so there is that. Sanders was better, but again had a pick, had 3 fumbles, so you turn the ball over 4 times, you're not going to win very many games unless your defense is playing lights out. And then that later in that game, the defense was not playing lights out. So that's kind of where we're at with it. So like I said, it's hard to make up for that. It's hard to make up for a 4. Is it 4-0 or 4-1? A 4-0 turnover differential. It's hard to overcome that. In any, like I said, college, high school, Pop Warner, NFL, it's hard to overcome that. But yeah, again, at least it was a competitive game. But again, don't we know how good Texas is this year? They are 4-2, so there is that. But Oklahoma State was the conference's probably last chance. Kansas State technically too, but Oklahoma State is probably Kansas is. Oklahoma State was probably the conference's last real chance of getting a playoff team this year. Now, I don't know who that playoff team is going to be, that 4th spot, because, I guess maybe it could be Notre Dame if they beat Clemson in this upcoming week, who won't have Trevor Lawrence, which is another big takeaway that I'm going to touch on in a second. But maybe it could be them. Like I said, maybe whoever finishes second place in the SEC, something like that. If Wisconsin continues to win, maybe it could be them. But again, they had to play games first. So it's really hard to know. But as of right now, like I said, Clemson, Alabama, and Ohio State are shocking, I know, the 3 best teams in the country. And those are probably the 3 locks. Everyone else is playing for that 4th seed. So as I said, I want to touch on Trevor Lawrence because it looks like they said that though he could potentially be out of like quarantine and stuff, they still got to do the cardiac test and things like that. And because of that, Dabo said like he's not going to play next week against Notre Dame, which means they will have to start the freshman, who was a little shaky against Boston College, not going to lie. But he got better as the game went on, especially in that second half, because they were down, 15 at the end of the half after they kicked a 50-yard field goal. But he got some things going, got a 30-yard touchdown run, had a touchdown pass. Travis Etienne did his thing in the second half as well. Was now, I think, like the ACC leading rusher or something like that, had 140 yards receiving. So they can win, and obviously the defense came up clutch there at the end. So they can win with this Uiagalelei, the freshman. But, like, you prefer to have Trevor Lawrence out there. So we'll see what happens next week. And that's the thing, is that even if they lose, like, it's not going to really be a stain on their record too much. Like, they'll still probably get in because it's a loss minus Trevor Lawrence. Again, if they would have lost with Trevor Lawrence, that's a completely different story. But because the freshman, I imagine the committee won't hold it against them too much, plus it's on the road. And they're still favored, so they should probably still win. Because it's not like Notre Dame has been, like, dominant this year or anything. Though they had a very good game against Georgia Tech and Pittsburgh the last 2 weeks. But, like, they barely beat Louisville. They beat Florida State, but, like, Florida State's not that good. They beat USF, but also, like, USF is what now? They are 1-5. Like, they're not that good. They beat Duke to begin the year, but, like, Duke is 2-5. Like, they're not that good. Like, they haven't really played anybody good, per se. And this will be their true test in terms with Clemson. And even Boston College, potentially, because obviously they played Clemson tough, and they also have North Carolina on the schedule, who lost again. But it's 4-2, so they're a little bit better. But still, this is the game. If Notre Dame wants to get into the college football playoff next weekend, and we'll talk about that obviously later on in the week, then this is the game they need to win. So those are some of my big takeaways. Like I said, the Big Ten, it's Ohio State's, as it always is, it's Ohio State's to lose. And even with that, I don't know who the second best team in the conference is, because teams that you thought could be second best clearly are head and shoulders below where Ohio State is right now. Maybe sans Wisconsin, just because we don't really know what Wisconsin is at this point without them playing due to COVID. Like I said, Big 12, we're going to have to wait another year to get a playoff team, because it's not going to happen this year. They're not going to let a playoff team in from the Big 12 with 2 losses. There's just no way. Even if, like, Oklahoma or one of the type of teams, like, runs the table, like, it would be hard to imagine. A lot would have to happen for them to get in that standpoint. And then, like I said, Clemson will be without Trevor Lawrence next weekend, even though, like I said, the freshman did what he had to do. Did not look great in the first half, but got it together. Which, again, is to be expected in a freshman starting his first game. Like, he's not going to be perfect, but it's going to... Oh, I take that back. Another sneaky team could be Cincinnati. They're 5-0. They just worked Memphis this weekend. And, like I said, they don't really have the toughest schedule. But if they win out, they at least make a compelling argument. Assuming, again, Notre Dame it doesn't also win out. You know what I'm saying? But they're going to be what I imagine what they're... Oh, they actually... No, they're 6th now. So again, they're not that far out of the money. They're not that far out of the playoff if they can win out their games, which shouldn't be impossible to do. And especially since Georgia, assuming Alabama, these stays undefeated, they're going to have like at least one loss, if not more, if they make the championship game. Like I said, they're going to be ahead of Florida and Texas A&M, teams like that if they win out, things like that. So again, we'll see what happens. But like I said, Clemson, Notre Dame, that's the one for Notre Dame. If they win, they're money. They're good money. If they lose, then there goes their playoff shot. But again, we'll see how that plays out next weekend when that goes down. But seeing as we're about the halfway point in the college football season, I thought now would be a good time, especially with Trevor Lawrence now going to be missing 2 games, and he's basically been taking himself out. Oh, well, not taking himself, but he's unfortunately been taken out of the Heisman race, you would probably say, just because of, again, missing 2 games, hard to, in a season like this, hard to really make that up. Though, again, not impossible. Where's the Heisman race stand? Then again, it's still early, like the Pac-12 hasn't even played yet. Big Ten just really getting started. But with, like I said, with Trevor Lawrence out, is there anybody that's a clear-cut favorite? Can Justin Fields get in the mix? Things like that we will discuss right after the break. So stay right there.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Back here again on the GSMC Sports Podcast, presented by GSMC Podcast Network. So, before this weekend, it was probably fair to say that Trevor Lawrence was in the driver's seat for the Heisman Trophy. Again, all he needed to do was continue to play well. The Clemson just needed to continue to win, and it probably was his to lose. But now, going to miss his second game next weekend against Notre Dame, their biggest game they had left this year, most likely. It's going to be tough for him to make up that ground on some of the other guys. And I think even like betting wise and things like that, like I don't really bet like that. But I believe in terms of like the favorite and things like that, he is no longer the favorite. It has now gone to one Justin Fields, which is kind of surprising. A little bit, just because, again, obviously Justin Fields only played 2 games. But, honestly, it's going to be good this year, most likely. You would think it would continue to be that way. Again, not impossible that they could drop, or someone else could overtake his spot, I should say. But as of this point, you would think he's probably the front runner. He has 6 touchdown passes in 2 games, completed almost 90% of his passes, about 600 yards, and it's with... It obviously is the win over Ohio State. I mean, not Ohio State. Had a win over Penn State just this weekend. So, like I said, they don't really play a whole lot of good teams necessarily. So far this season, not even so far, but just like in general this season. So it's going to be tough for him to get these big numbers or just like have these big time matchups and things like that, because obviously one of them was Penn State, and we obviously know Penn State is not that good this year. Michigan was thought to be one, but they're probably not as good as we thought this year, or people would like to think that they could be, because again, every year it's like, oh, Michigan, is this finally their year? And it never is. Indiana, like I said, is the only undefeated team currently left on their schedule, and I'm not even sure how good they are. So it is that, or there is that, but like I said, Justin Fields continues to play the way he's been playing, and they continue to win, obviously, like I said, then there's a chance, at least, that he could be the Heisman winner this year. And also, again, overtaking, at least in terms of the Sports Illustrated article I was reading, overtaking Trevor Lawrence in terms of like favorites and like that, is Mac Jones, who has continued. He played well in the wake of Tua's injury last year, and has continued to build on that this season. Through, I guess, how many games have they played? 7 or 6? They have played 6 games. He has over 2,000 yards passing, 16 touchdowns, only 2 interceptions. Again, doesn't really have a whole lot on the ground, which is probably going to hurt him. Because obviously Justin Fields can run around a little bit, so that's going to be able to boost his stats up a tad. And also, he lost Jalen Waddle, so we'll see how that affects him, though Devonta Smith had a very good game this past weekend. Had 11 for 203 and 4 touchdowns against Mississippi State, so he was more than willing to make up the slack. I don't know if I talked about it too much on this podcast, but I mean, you could make the argument that he was their best receiver for Alabama last year, and they had They had 2 receivers going in the first round, in Judy and Ruggs, and this guy was arguably the best one. And then on top of that, like Waddle was/is maybe the most talented. Again, I don't want to go that far because I probably still put Judy, but again, there was at least an argument because then they were like, oh, like they have those 3 guys, and they have this Waddle kid who is just as good, if not better, than all of them. So, like I said, in an all-A team with multiple first-round picks at the receiver position, Devontae Smith was there. Best is the hard thing to quantify, but he was their most productive receiver last year, and he's only continuing that this year. So again, he'll try to make up for the lack of Waddle being in the lineup. So we'll see how that affects them going forward. And they got not a big game, quote unquote, but just in name value, a big game against LSU. And then they play Auburn later in the year in the Iron Bowl, obviously. Which those are probably 2 of Auburn's the best team they have left. But again, if Mac Jones goes and then they play Georgia or Florida just basically Georgia or Florida in the SEC championship game, and then he has another good game there, then hey, maybe Mac Jones could sneak his way into a Heisman. Wouldn't that be kind of interesting? This again, Tua leaves, then this guy comes in, not really like a big. I don't want to say that. I don't know how big of a recruit he was, but as I know, no one expected him to. I don't think anybody really expected him to do this. Like again, it's almost like Tua hasn't even left. Like the offense hasn't missed a beat. Especially since this year their defense is not as good, so it kind of has to not miss a beat. Like the lowest amount of points they scored this season is 38 in their opening game. They scored 52, 63, 41, 48, and then 41 points. So Mac Jones having himself a good season. And so again, he's another guy that could be on that short little watch list. And another guy that I talked to you guys about heading into the weekend that I told you should maybe try to watch a little bit. And again, I don't know if you guys did or didn't because, again, it's BYU. They're not really going to force anybody to watch BYU games. But Zach Wilson's another sneaky one. I believe that he could, especially with Lawrence out, he could potentially sneak into that 3rd and then maybe continue to sneak his way up if he continues to play well. And according to the Sports Illustrated article, this is according to Odds on Bet Online, he's 4th in terms of like the favorites. Zach Wilson is. So he's another guy that, again, he's been putting up great numbers. If he continues to put up great numbers and BYU continues to win because they're currently 7-0, and their next 3 games are against, also their last 3 games against Boise State, who's 2-0 right now and ranked in the top 25 at Boise State, but they're expected to win. They put North Alabama, that's whatever, and then they finish off the year in the middle of December against San Diego State. So we'll see how good San Diego State is at that point, but he gets a nice little win against Boise State in Boise. And that's not bad. And again, he continues to put up the numbers. Because right now he's at 2,100 yards, 2,152, 19 touchdowns, 2 picks. He also has 7 touchdowns on the ground and 150 yards. So again, the numbers are there for him. The record is there. The team standing is there. Again, I don't think he's going to get it because, BYU, who do they really play? But it's going to be difficult to argue with the numbers when you put him up there, especially if the team's undefeated. Now, he might be a guy that gets invited. I don't think he'll end up winning. But, again, with Trevor Lawrence out, and if Zach Wilson puts up another good game against a ranked opponent on the road, he could at least sneak himself into that 3rd. Like I said, I don't think he's not going to win it. But he could at least sneak himself into that 3rd. And he's definitely will be the dark horse candidate for the Heisman, especially if somehow BYU goes undefeated, some other things happen to get into that playoff berth. They'll probably get smoked. But at least that'll be good for the program and good for him and things like that. So we'll see kind of how that plays out. But yeah, like I said, Trevor Lawrence, it's not his fault. It is what it is. But he definitely is going to have some ground to make up in the Heisman race. If that's something he cares about, I don't think it does. They're the school, I think, the reason why he wanted to play and things like that, just because he wanted to win a championship and be around the guys and things like that. So I don't really think he cares that much about the Heisman, though it would be kind of crazy if, wait, who won the Heisman last year? Who did win the Heisman last year? Now I gotta look that up, because I don't remember who won the Heisman last year. I'm trying to think, because I know it wasn't Trevor. Heisman winners. So I'm kind of curious who did win the Heisman last year. To see Joe Burrow. Wow, I'm an idiot. I apologize, Joe. I mean, you know how much I love you. Wow, I completely forgot about Joe Burrow. So yeah, it'd be kind of interesting if, like, arguably the biggest quarterback prospect in the last 5-10 years, something like that, and then I mean, granted, the Heisman Trophy is what it is. There's really no real big to do about it. Like, not just because you win it doesn't mean you're going to be good in the pros or things like that. Like, you look at the recent winners. Again, Kyler looks good, but Baker, especially since they lost to the Raiders today, he did not look that good in this game. Lamar won MVP, that's good, but hey, I mean, he hasn't looked as good as this year, but again, won the MVP. Derrick Henry looks good, and these are just the last 10 years. Mariota, I think he's on IR or something. He's not a starter. Obviously, Jameis Winston's currently backing up. Drew Brees, Johnny Manziel, we all know what happened there. RG3, again, was good for the rookie year, but then the knee situation and other things kind of ruined him. And then Cam. Again, Cam's had a solid NFL career, but right now, he's not looking that great, though. I don't know if that's an injury thing or a COVID thing or whatever. So, like I said, Trevor Lawrence winning the Heisman Trophy is not a big deal, obviously, but it just would have been a nice little send-off for his college career to win a Heisman, get back in the playoff, potentially get back in the championship game, maybe win it again, just to bookend his career with the championship as a freshman and the championship as a junior. That'd be kind of cool. Plus, he can add in the Heisman because last year he didn't have the year, and then obviously the first year he was a freshman, and plus Kyler played well. So again, he never really had a real legitimate shot because no one was beating Joe Burrow last year. So it is what it is. Like I said, you're not going to win as a true freshman. You just don't have enough hype. I don't know, not to say hype is if this is a hype award, because obviously no one had Joe Burrow winning the Heisman before the season. But again, this it would be not that a freshman hasn't won. I think Tebow won as a redshirt freshman, if I remember correctly. Or even didn't. It didn't. I think Manziel won as a redshirt freshman too, if I remember correctly. Let me double check. Yeah, he was a redshirt freshman as well. So, oh no, so Tebow was a sophomore. Okay, he was a sophomore. My bad. But yeah, so Manziel was the freshman, and then Jameis won as a freshman too. So I guess he was he had to have been a true freshman, right? Jameis was. He was the youngest player to win the Heisman. Redshirt freshman, okay, both redshirt freshmen. But he also was the youngest to win the Heisman. So there's that. Like I said, Trevor Lawrence doesn't really care, but I was just curious to see kind of where the situation was at, because it looked like it was going to be his to lose coming off of that big 400-yard game that he had a couple weeks ago. But now that he's going to be out for a couple weeks, you kind of got to rearrange the things and kind of look at where it's at. And it's crazy that Justin Fields, even only after 2 games, could very well, if he continues to play well, have the Heisman lined up, even though he's going to end up playing less games than Mac Jones and Trevor Lawrence, and I guess probably play around the same amount of games as Zach Wilson, because Zach Wilson will have 10 in the regular season. I don't know if they have I don't know if his conference has a championship game, whatever. And then obviously the Big Ten's only going to play 9 games, including the championship. So he'll end up playing less than most guys. But if the Ohio's is undefeated, they continue to play well. He plays well. It's a weird year. He may end up getting it. So I just thought that was an interesting thing to kind of look at and kind of discuss now that it seems like Trevor Lawrence is out. And again, maybe if he comes back, or even if they lose this weekend to Notre Dame, that could be a big boost for his case to say, look at how important I am, and then they come back and then they end up winning the conference again, which, they should. But you get the point. Again, if he's out, same thing. Not exactly the same thing, but the way you look at Dak, your importance is easier to quantify or easier to judge when you're not playing than when you are playing. Because all right, how much better or worse or different are we without you on the field? And again, they still were able to win, though I think they probably won a little bit more easily if Trevor Lawrence is out there on the field. But again, the Notre Dame game will be the big test for the freshman on the road. We'll see if he's ready for the prime time. It then took him a little while to get heated up against Boston College. I don't think Notre Dame's that good, but in theory, you would like not to take that much time. So we'll see if they lose this weekend, then that's a nice little boost to his case. If he cares. Like I said, I don't think Trevor Lawrence cares about that. He just worried about the national winning championship. But again, it'd be a nice little individual accolade to end your college career off right. But like I said, after 2 games, it's looking like it could be Justin Fields. Which, again, is wild because Ohio State's only played 2 games. But at least the favorite, according to BetOnline, is Justin Fields. And I get it at this point. I do. Especially if Ohio State continues to win, which they should. So, after we come back here, there were some players in the MLB that were granted qualifying offers ahead of free agency. Coming up, so we kind of talk about that. Let's talk about some of the big names. Kind of how it's going to go. Because free agency has been so weird over the last few years in terms of like how long it's taken, how drawn out it is. And just kind of like the lack of the frenzy that there is, or like there is in other sports. And I think it's only going to continue this year due to the pandemic, because a lot of people aren't in the pandemic. I'm sorry if you don't get that reference, but it's a Meek Mill thing. Very funny on the Twitter. But yeah, so we will talk about that right after the break. So stay right there.
Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
We're back here again on the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by GSMC Podcast. So, 6 players were offered qualifying offers, or were given qualifying offers by their respective teams on Sunday afternoon. Those included pitchers Trevor Bauer with the Reds, Marcus Stroman with the Mets, and Kevin Gausman with the San Francisco Giants, excuse me. Watched a lot of football today. Also, position players DJ LeMahieu with the Yankees, George Springer with the Astros, and JT Realmuto with the Phillies also received offers that will tie them to their current teams if they accept the offers on a 1-year contract worth $18.9 million. Players have 10 days to accept or reject the offer. If they reject, they'll become free agents, though the teams signing them will be required to give up draft compensation to do so. Only those players who have never received a qualifying offer in their career can be offered one, which explains Marcell Ozuna did not get one this year. He was given one after the 2019 season with the Cardinals. Some prominent players who were eligible for qualifying offers but did not receive one were Astros outfielder Michael Brantley, A's infielder Marcus Semien. But I mean, the A's with the way they run things, I'm not surprised due to the fact that they're not really trying to spend all that money on people like that. Also, with the A's, their closer Liam Hendricks, who was very good for them this year, and also Los Angeles Angels shortstop Arlington Simmons. They're all free agents without draft compensation attached to their signing with a new team. Teams are free to sign anyone who has not been extended a qualifying offer. There are 181 free agents this offseason, according to the MLBPA. And obviously, also there have been guys that have had offers accepted or offers declined or things like that. I think John Lester got his decline, Chris Archer got his decline, Mitch Moreland, a bunch of other guys. But like I said, these are the guys that could potentially stand to make a decent amount of money on 1-year deals, which I think is very interesting, just because obviously some of these names are going to be some of the better players out there. Trevor Bauer is probably the best pitcher on the market, obviously, at least in terms of like free agency. So it would be interesting to see. Well, I mean, he's not. I would doubt he would want to stay with the Reds, even though $19 million is a lot of money. But it'd be interesting to see if any of these guys, after this kind of season that they've had, with the whole pandemic and, again, the uncertainty with the salary cap and different things like that, like, if any of them would be willing to take, like, basically a 1-year deal as opposed to risking it in free agency and kind of seeing what they get. Like I said, you have 10 days to reject or accept the deal, so you don't have that long to decide like what you want to do. But I'm saying at the same time, it's like you don't really know what free agency is going to look like, especially when MLB free agency, like, it just drags on for so long. Like, I don't know how or why they don't like to do it the way the NBA or the NFL does it, where it's kind of just like it's an event in of itself in free agency. Like, literally, like, the day that free agency starts, even in the NBA where, like, there's the moratorium, so you can't even, I mean, there's basically the same thing in the NFL, but, like, even the days where, like, you can't, like, people can sign, but they're not officially signed, they're just like, you know, a handshake agreement, like, you can back out, you can change decisions, you can have a team lock you in their house, get you to not go and sign with a new team, like, different things like that. Like, that stuff happens, and it's an event. It's like, again, people have like TV specials and different things like that. But for whatever reason, the MLB hasn't really been able to capture that same sort of intrigue. And I think a lot of it is because it takes so long. Like, if say like KD, when he signed with the Warriors, if he didn't sign until like July 20th or whatever, or not even July, like, again, like Machado and Bryce, when they were signed, they didn't sign until like the next year, literally. So again, imagine if that happens and Durant didn't sign until like, I guess, well, because the season starts in October. So imagine he didn't sign until like September. Like, what, like the biggest name on the market doesn't sign. Like, same thing with like LeBron when he was leaving any of the times he's left. Imagine if he didn't sign, and again, he usually takes his time with it, so it's like a week. But like, imagine if he didn't sign with the Lakers until August or September. Like, it's just not a thing that they do. So like I said, I don't understand why it happens like that in the MLB. 100%. If someone that's a little bit more in tune with baseball and like their free agency thing, that could probably explain that to me. But it's very odd that for whatever reason teams like slow play this, and even like the agents and players slow play it as well. Because again, I imagine there are deals that could be made earlier, and they're just like, yeah, no rush, we'll wait. And again, I get it because the season doesn't. You don't have to go to spring training until like February, or things like that. So I get it, but at the same time, it's just odd to me that it takes so long for them to sign, and it's gonna probably happen again this year. So it's like even though now we're kind of talking about guys and decisions that could or could not be made, like again, there's going to be big names that are going to be out there for weeks and months potentially, and and for every reason there's no real rush to get on it. And so, like I said, there's no real rush to get on it to discuss it because you just discuss it as it happens. Even though, again, you could talk about, oh, like, where should Trevor Bauer resign? Even though, again, anybody could use a pitcher as good as he's been. So there's that. Where should George Springer sign? Like, even though, like, again, anybody could use a hitter, especially in the postseason, as good as he's been. Especially if you're a team that's trying to get to the postseason, i.e. the Mets. Now with their new owner, Steve Cohen, shout out to him. And shout out to Mets fans because obviously you no longer have the Wilpons, and you would think Cohen will bring some sort of change and stability to the franchise and not get robbed via Ponzi scheme. But, you know, I don't know if they expected I don't know if they want to say how much if they expected the Wilpons to get robbed. But, hey, such is life. It happens sometimes. But yeah, like I said, then now that you have new ownership, it's like, hey, look, maybe we could do things a little bit differently. Maybe we'll not yet now that the Mets have never signed a big-time free agent, but, like, maybe we'll attract bigger names or better players that have more success over their career instead of giving out money to guys that may or may not be deserving of the money. They just happen to be willing to take it. Because, again, you offer me a certain amount of money to do a lot of things, I will take the money. So, again, there are guys that, like, hey, maybe I don't want to be a Met, but I also want to make hundreds of millions of dollars. So, hey, I mean, it's still baseball at the end of the day. And then obviously most of them, they get there and then they stink. But, you know, we'll kind of see how that plays out. But yeah, so just looking at those players, again, qualifying offer-wise, Trevor Bauer makes 0 sense. It does not make any sense for him to sign with the Reds, mainly because the Reds stink. And he's going and again, he's what, like 30? He's born 91, so he's like 29, going to turn 30. Coming off of a potential Cy Young season. I guess obviously we won't know for a little bit, but coming off of a potential Cy Young season, like, what would be the purpose of him signing a qualifying offer? Again, to stay with the Reds. Now, if it weren't the Reds and it was a different team, all right, then maybe having a different discussion. But again, he may never pitch as well as he pitched in 2020. I mean, well, he's literally never pitched as well as he pitched in 2020 in terms of, like, ERA and WHIP. And obviously the innings are down and things like that, so it's hard to really quantify. Or his strikeout to walk rate, or his or even like his win loss. Like, I don't know, his win percentage was terrible, but that's because the Reds, not terrible, but it's like average. That's because the Reds stink. So there is that. But again, a lot of his stats have never been better. So it's like, if you're him, it's like, all right, I could take the 19 mil, but also if I could get a decent amount of money and plus a little bit more stability. Because again, this probably would be his one chance to get a big contract. And why not try to get the big contract off the best year of your career? It doesn't make any sense for him to do that, in my opinion. But now, if you're looking at a guy like Marcus Stroman, unless he really doesn't want to stay with the Mets, like, he wasn't really that great in 2018. And then obviously he opted out last year. So it's like, why would I not take free money if it's there? Like, if you know what I'm saying. Like, he doesn't have the same leg to stand on as like a Trevor Bauer does in terms of like his success and his record and his stats and his accolades in this past year. Like, he does not have that, seeing as he didn't pitch all last year. And then even when he got to the Mets, he was like, all right. He wasn't great. He was just like, all right. He was worse than he was with the Blue Jays, so there is that. But yeah, he wasn't anything like special. So it was like, I don't know what kind of big money he would be expecting to get in free agency. So I could see him being like, hey, look, let me take this qualifying offer. If he wants to stay with the Mets. If he doesn't want to stay with the Mets, then all right, then all bets are off. But if he doesn't mind staying in New York, then it's like, hey, look, new ownership. We got a decent team. If we go out and add some pieces, we could have a better team, things like that. So, let me give this another shot. And then if he does do that, then, like I said, that makes sense, because then he's going to make a lot of money on the qualifying offer this year, and then it'll continue on next offseason to potentially, if he has a good year, make more money in a year where the financials are a little bit more certain. Because no one really knows how much teams are going to be willing to spend, or how much money was lost or by each like club and things like that, like due to the pandemic and the no fans and things like that. Since, like we talked about, like a 40% of their revenue just from the gate, things like that. So they were really hurt by having no fans. They don't have the same kind of TV deals that the NFL or the NBA have and stuff like that. So, I mean, obviously they do have some TV deals because of the playoffs and things like that, but it's not the same. And I imagine the money's not the same. So, I don't know how much guys would be willing to spend big money on Marcus Stroman after not pitching this year. So there is that. So again, I could maybe, if he wants to stay in New York, maybe he could sign the qualifying offer. Like, if I'm George Springer, I'm not doing it. I mean, and again, no disrespect to the Astros. And maybe if you want to stay in Astro, but it doesn't really sound like that. It's not like you want to get paid. And if he does, I mean, he's, I guess outside of Ozuna, he's the best hitter on the market. Has well-documented postseason success. Like, again, he's only, I think, in his early 30s. Like, everybody would want that, plays a good outfield. Like, again, what's not to want? Especially if you're looking for, a power hitting. I mean, you're not going to hit, 50 home runs. But, you get the point, a power hitting right-handed bat in the outfield. Again, what benefit would George Springer have of staying with the Astros for one more year to then be a free agent next year? That doesn't make any sense. Outside of the pandemic situation. So there's that. Similar thing with Realmuto is that, if he doesn't want to stay with the Phillies, which, again, I could understand to a degree due to the fact that the way this is kind of played out with them, because he's wanted to stay. He wanted to get signed. Bryce has wanted him to get signed. Guys, he's wanted to be there. And yet they just won't give him his money for whatever reason. Can't tell you why. No, they don't want to give him his money. So then it's why? I feel disrespected in a way. Why would I deal with that again? So again, if I'm him, maybe I'm like, hey, let me see. Not that he doesn't. He might not still stay with the Phillies, because it still is one of the better catchers in the game. But it's why would I deal with the team or franchise or ownership or management or whatever that I feel disrespected me? I said, if you disrespect me with an offer, like, why we're not going to negotiate in good faith anymore after that, because it feels like we don't have the same value of me as a player. So yeah, that's an interesting one. Like I said, I wouldn't really understand the idea of him taking a qualifying offer either at this point. I mean, like, LeMahieu, if he wants to stay in New York, maybe. But again, I mean, he could, literally anybody could use a guy that hits, what did he hit this year? 330? 364, my bad. He hit 327 last year. So again, anybody could use that in any lineup. Doesn't matter who, doesn't matter where. Anybody could use that kind of bat in their lineup. So he's not going to have his array of suitors if he were to hit free agency. But again, it just come down to if he wants to stay with the Yankees and he thinks they have a chance to win it all next year. Which, I mean, again, they always do, but they just haven't been able to get over that hump. But yeah, he's another interesting one to see if he's willing to accept the qualifying offer, which I don't think he will. But again, it will be interesting to see kind of how this plays out, and then from there, just like what are the rumors, what are we hearing? Just because, like I said, this is going to drag out for a while because that's just the way MLB free agency works. But at the same time, it's like that doesn't mean we're not going to start hearing things and seeing things about where guys could potentially end up or what teams they're talking to or what kind of deals they could be signed. But again, if you're worried about the uncertainty of the money, you just want to get some guaranteed money, I can understand the qualifying offer. But again, if you're like Trevor Bauer, like I'm the best pitcher on the market, like I could get money from anybody, especially those teams like again like maybe like a White Sox or probably not the Mets if Showman resigns. But again, teams are looking for a front of the line starter because there just aren't that many good ones. Because again, most teams have 2, max 3 starters nowadays because everyone's like investing in like these expansive bullpens. So if you have a guy that can be an ace and you're a team in need of pitching, why would you not go after Trevor Bauer? Same thing if you're a team that needs a more pop in your lineup, but definitely more pop from your outfield. Why would you not go after George Springer, pandemic or no pandemic? Like I said, so certain guys will, I think, get money. Plus, these guys aren't like the Machados, Harpers kind of contract. They're not going to get like the $300 million deals, things like that. But like I said, I still think, relatively speaking, for them, they should get good money and money that could potentially be worth more long term, obviously long term, than this qualifying offer would. So it's like, why shortchange yourself? And you never know what happens. You could get hurt. You could have a down year. Then again, now you're losing even less money. I mean, you're going to get even less money than you would have potentially in this pandemic off season. But again, as the MLB free agency kind of plays out, we will see. We'll talk about it. We'll discuss all that fun stuff. But yeah, I saw some qualifying offer things, and I just wanted to touch on them a little bit. Just thought that was pretty interesting. Just some of the names that were gifted them, and some of the names that even weren't. So, like I said, that was interesting to me. Speaking of interesting, just as the Blue Jays weren't able to play in Toronto because Canada's like, we're not letting Americans in because of COVID and because they haven't handled it properly. And I mean, I get it. Though, in fairness to America, we'll defend them a little bit. A lot of places are having second waves, though. In America, you could argue we never really finished the first. It was just like spread out. Like I said, we never really got it down like low in terms of cases. And that, though, obviously we have a big country. But we never really got down like super, super low, as it maybe did in some of these other places that are now experiencing the second wave. So it's hard to say for certain if this is the second wave, is the third wave, is a continuation of the first wave, who knows. But again, regardless, I can understand why Toronto being the Raptors, wouldn't want us to play there. So now they got to find a new place to play. So we're going to talk about that. Kind of what are some of the options? What options do I think make sense? What options do I think would be kind of weird? All that fun stuff. We'll talk about it right after the break. So stay right there.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC, Invicta FC, Bellator, and one championship. We got the fights covered. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
GSMC Sports Podcast presented by GSMC Podcast Network. So, this is from Yahoo Sports. The Raptors, obviously, want to play their season in Toronto next year. That would be easiest, simplest, make everything just more convenient for everyone involved. But, due to the fact that travel from the United States to Canada is currently restricted, including a 14-day quarantine, and considering the increase, as like I said, in positive tests in the United States recently, those restrictions could remain in place for a while. That has the Raptors considering a stateside residence for the next season, especially if the season starts December 22nd. Newark, the former home of the New Jersey Nets, is an option. Stefan Bondi of the New York Daily News said. He also lists a couple other possible places. The Raptors, again, I guess this is from him, the Raptors have spoken to the operators of the Prudential Center about using the 19,500 seat arena. According to a source, it's one of the few options that for Masai Ujiri's squad, and in preference for the NBA because of this close proximity to all of Toronto's division foes. The Raptors have also discussed playing in Tampa Bay or Nashville, or as tenants in another NBA's team arena. According to a source, Kansas City pitched its T-Mobile Center. Louisville has floated and was reported and reportedly shot down. There's some speculation about the team moving over the border to Buffalo, just like the Blue Jays did. While some of the destinations offer a warmer climate, none of them match the geographical sense of the Rock. Louisville is, according to this article from Yahoo Sports, Louisville is dead as potential home base. Beyond that, just about any city with an NBA-ready arena can make a case. Most likely, there will not be fans in the building for these games, or if so, it'll likely be limited, which again would make sense. So the fan base is not a consideration. The ability to reduce travel will certainly factor into a decision which favors Newark. Ultimately, the Raptors will choose the best financial offer. A decision on the Raptors' next move will be based on when the season starts, obviously, and if the availability for rapid tests for the coronavirus would allow the Raptors to play in Toronto, because the quarantine period would go away. Once the NBA and the Players Union agree on the look and timing of next season, expect the Raptors decision quickly after that. So, like I said, Newark makes the most sense. It doesn't mean it's going to happen, but it makes the most sense. They used to have a team here, so it's not like you're going into a new city that doesn't have an NBA team or isn't used to having an NBA team, so you're not really sure. And plus, on top of the fact, you're not even having fans, most likely. But if you do have some fans in the arena, which I imagine they will try to do, at least it's not like you're going to completely a non-basketball city where you're worried about like getting fans in and things like that. Like, New Jersey had a team. It left to go to Brooklyn. But it still has the place to play. So again, the Prudential Center in Newark makes a lot of sense. Plus, like they said, on top of the fact that it's close to the teams they're going to have to play. You don't have to travel that far. Then that's the biggest issue with places like a Louisville or like a Tampa or like a Nashville, is like when you're playing, like again, you look at their division. They are in the Atlantic Division. So they're going to play the Sixers. They're going to play the Nets, obviously. They're going to play the Celtics. And they're going to play the Knicks. So again, even the fact that they're in Toronto is kind of wild. But again, if you're going to have teams in that area, like why not also be in the area? Like again, Newark is not that far from the city in MSG. It's not that far from, I mean, it's a little bit further from Brooklyn, but it's still doable. And then obviously Philly and Boston, it's relatively close considering where else they could be. So again, there's really no reason not for it to be New Jersey. Now again, I may be a little biased because I am from New Jersey, but still, it's just like realistically, like all right. So let's lay out some of the other options. So we talked about Tampa Bay because apparently there is some sort of facility they could use there. And again, this is on top of literally like any city. Like again, like they were talking about like going to Seattle or like doing other things. Which again, it would be cool to have a team back in Seattle, but like it has to be a West Coast team because again, the Raptors play in the Eastern Conference, so you can't have an Eastern Conference team stationed on the West Coast. That makes literally zero sense. Same thing happened with, like I said, with Toronto and the Blue Jays when they had to change. Like they couldn't go they couldn't just go anywhere. You had to go, especially due to you basically playing teams in your geographical area. You couldn't go that far, relatively speaking, to their other teams. So you have to go somewhere near where the teams would be. That's why Buffalo, even though it's kind of out of the way, did make sense in terms of at least proximity to these other teams. So just the travel wouldn't be that crazy. Like I said, Tampa, all right, you're on the East Coast, so that's good. It's only like a couple hour flight for most of these, probably a little bit further from like Boston, but it's only a couple hours. So, all right, is that doable? Technically, yes. But again, you're playing a bunch of Northeast teams. Like, why be down south? Like, if you were playing like in the Southeast, where you're playing Orlando and Miami and teams like that, all right, that's a different story. Like Charlotte, all right, this is a different story. But those aren't the teams you're playing. You're playing teams up north, so you want to stay in that same like that relative area. Same thing, like again, what they talked about with Nashville. Like that doesn't make any sense because again, it's not close to anything or any of the teams that you would be playing. I know also they feel like I said the Kansas City thing, but I know that they got a letter written to them about how the Kansas City police doesn't really, and their police commissioner don't really support the Black Lives Matter movement, and obviously the NBA is big on that. So like, how do you go to a city that doesn't support the cause that you're supporting? Like that seems kind of backwards. So Kansas City is not going to happen, most likely. But again, even then, it's out of the way. Like there's no reason for them to be playing on the East in the Eastern Conference, and then also being like their home arena, quote unquote, for the season be in Kansas City. That makes literally zero sense. Like I said, I imagine it's for the same reason Louisville was shut down. Because then, I mean, I don't know exactly why Louisville was shut down, but again, it makes sense because it's not close to anything. It is not close. Like if you're gonna play, and again, obviously a lot of this will be financial. So again, they could just like share. Like again, it's not like the Jets and the Giants don't share a home arena. Like you could figure it out some way with scheduling and things like that. You have these teams to play on different days or at different times or whatever you want to do. So like I said, they could be stationed in like MSG or like Brooklyn or something like that. They could share a home arena with a different team. Like it's not that serious, as long as it's on the East Coast. Like you can't do that. Like I said, yeah, the Clippers and Lakers share the Staples. Like it's doable. It's not impossible. Like it's not ideal. This isn't what they want to do. Obviously, the Raptors want to play in Toronto. They want to stay where they stay, practice in their own facility, play home games in their own arena, like every other team gets to do. Like that's what they want to do. But due to the pandemic, some of us have to make some people in life have to make adjustments, and unfortunately, the team from a different country has to make that adjustment. Like I said, just like the Blue Jays had to do. And this was like months ago where we didn't even know exactly how it was going to work. Now we know that, like, yeah, now we're probably got fans, like, cases are rising, like, it's not really a good look right now. Like, especially if Canada keeps up with their, like, the quarantine and like 14 days and different things, even if they have the rapid tests, it's like, is that good for them to be traveling? Especially when you're having, like, the whole point is to try to keep your cases to a minimum. So, like, okay, you could have a team just like you're seeing. And it's already going to be bad because they're going to be traveling regardless. But like you're seeing with NFL, you saw in the MLB where like, or even in college where like people are catching cases in their home area and then like they're traveling and then like eventually infecting other people. It's hard to say exactly when you got it or how you got it because again, it's an invisible virus. You don't really. It's not like you know exactly where you got it from. Though again, you can have an educated guess. But still, it's like even with rapid tests, like, is that going to be enough to make it safe for like the people that aren't traveling, that are staying in Toronto, that work at the arena, that work in the back, that work, that like make the food, the ball boys, the towel guy, like it, obviously I imagine most of these guys will be wearing masks and stuff, but again, is that for the best? Since again, now that the players are going to be traveling, you're not in a bubble, you're not in a protected bubble, you're not going to be able to keep the virus out. So again, you want to limit travel as much as you can, and if you're a country that's bordering America or close to America or is going to have visitors from America, then I would, at least at this point in time, again, we'll see if it gets pushed back to the start date, see if that changes anything. But if it's going to start in December, which is about a month and a half, a little bit over a month and a half away, why would you expect things to be that much different in America? Like, why would you? So again, I don't see how or why Toronto would be playing in their home stadium this upcoming season based on the way America's handled the virus and based on the way Toronto's has handled, or not Toronto, but just like Canada in general. Obviously Toronto's included in that, but Canada in general has handled the virus. So like I said, I think due to proximity, due to convenience, and maybe even potentially due to money, because obviously that's going to be, as I said in the article, a deciding factor of the financial side of things is like what's the most cost effective, what's the best deal for us. So again, I'm not sure if that's going to be Newark, but if it is, I think that's where it should be. Again, just based on the teams that they're going to have to play and the location and stuff like that, just it seems very convenient to just like, hey, for a year, we'll be back in New Jersey. Again, well, not we, as in like the Raptors have been there before, but you get the point. Like, a team will be back in New Jersey. Again, I feel like that makes sense. Like, at the arena, they have the situation, they have everything there. New Jersey's used to having a basketball team, like it's not going to be that weird. But again, we'll see what they decide to do. I can't tell the Raptors what to do. I can't tell the league what they want to do. So we'll see. But again, that just makes sense from my perspective. Just like, hey, like the arena's there, it's ready to be used, like you will be good. Just all you gotta do is play and show up and play. And we'll see if they decide to show up and play, or if they decide to go with something else, or somewhere else, I guess I should say. But like I said, once the NBA kind of figures everything out, I think they pushed their decision date back another week to try to get things finalized, which again they've been doing for most of this time. And so not shocking they got pushed back again. But if that's their big concern, and that's what they want to worry about, like, hey, we got to push this stuff back to make sure that the timing's right. And then obviously then from there, then the Raptors will be able to go through, once we know the schedule and the outline and the way it's going to work and how it's going to play out. And then, okay, cool. Then the Raptors can decide on their thing. Then I think we'll be good. But like I said, that's not going to come until later in the week at the earliest, I would think. Because that decision isn't going to come in terms of like the players agreeing to whatever they need to agree to get the season started, whenever they want to get it started. That won't come later in the week, so the Raptors decision won't come until later in the week. But again, I think New Jersey makes the most sense based on the location and things like that. Like anywhere else, while it could work, I'm not going to say like there aren't other arenas out there that could be better than the Prudential Center in Newark. But like I said, in terms of like location and convenience and things like that, it makes more sense to me for him to be in New Jersey. But again, it's not my decision, so we will see how it plays out. But that'll do it for me here today on the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by GSMC Podcast Network. I want to thank you guys as always for listening. If you haven't already, subscribe to the podcast. Make sure you never miss an episode. Make sure you're always on top of when we drop our latest stuff. Also, if you could please as well, give us a 5-star rating, write us a nice review. Very appreciated, very helpful. That's what you guys like. If you guys dislike, the ways we can improve, all that fun stuff. And also, if you're on social media, we're on social media, so you can find us there, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We can talk, we can chat, we can debate, we can discuss. You can talk about your reactions and recaps from the NFL and college football this weekend. Who are your best teams in the NFL? Who do you like? Who's your top 5? We'll talk about this on the next episode, but who's like your award winners? The first half of the year, Coach of the Year, Rookie of the Year, Offensive Player, Defensive Player, MVP, things like that. Again, who's your Heisman winner? Who you think is going to win the Heisman? Again, it's early. Like the Pac-12 hasn't even started playing yet, but I mean, the chances of the Heisman winner coming out of the Pac-12 probably slim. But hey, you never know, because I was talking about a guy from BYU potentially being invited to the ceremony, so there is that. Also, and obviously MLB free agency is getting ready to start up. Like who who are some big names that you think teams will go after, or where you think some of these big names will end up, all that kind of stuff. Like, again, feel free to reach out to us and we can discuss that on whatever social media platform is most comfortable for you. Before I get out of here, as I always do, I want to make sure I give a shout out to the essential workers that have worked tirelessly through the pandemic to make sure everybody's safe and healthy at least as much as they can be. So doctors, nurses, EMTs, first responders, firefighters, grocery store workers, retail workers, dollar store, FedEx, UPS, Amazon, Postal Service, everybody that's been deemed essential and had to work tirelessly throughout the pandemic in safe or unsafe conditions around people that are taking the disease just or as seriously or less serious than they should be. All that stuff. Again, you are appreciated. You've made life safer and easier for the average person, so you are appreciated. Also, if you're going to continue to go out to bars and restaurants, things of that nature, make sure you wear a mask. Well, obviously, but at least when you enter the place, and when you're walking around in the restaurant or outside or whatever. Like if you're sitting at the table, then it is what it is. But like if you're going to be moving around, talking to people, doing things like that, outside of your group that you came with, I guess I just wear a mask. But if you're going to do that, tip your bartenders, your waiters, waitresses, people like that. I know the service industry is going to be hit, just like many industries, is going to be hit, especially hard this year. Due to the closings in the winter, that's probably going to happen, and potentially businesses not being able to not being able to reopen after the winter because they might not have the funds to do so. So in the time being, I said if you can, not going to tell anybody to go beyond their means, but if you can, I imagine a tip would go a long way for a lot of these people. Also, again, if you're using public services like Uber, Lyft, Postmates, delivery services, just like that, you can tip them as well. And they are making things more convenient for you, so you don't have to leave your house. So you don't have to get on public transportation or drive or do whatever to go wherever or get whatever you need. So like I said, a nice tip would probably go a long way. Also, wear your mask. But yeah, that'll do it for me today. I've been Chris Blades. That has been my time. And until next time, peace out.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.